much. And can you all hear me? Great, okay. So it's a big pleasure for me to be here today. First of all, because Singapore is a wonderful place. It's always a pleasure coming here. I come here quite regularly. And I had to laugh when I arrived on Monday, arriving from Denmark. You can probably imagine Denmark, it's very cold at this time of year. Something like 0 degrees, minus a few degrees, a little bit of snow, a lot of rain, very humid, very, very cold. Arriving in Singapore, getting into the taxi, the first thing the taxi driver says, "Ooh, it's so cold." And getting to my hotel, getting out in the street, people are wearing coats and saying, "Yeah, it's just 25 degrees." It's just a hilarious place, so it's great to be here. I'll take off here. But I'm also happy to be here at this event today, because it's fantastic to see so many people apparently being interested in this topic of bringing mindfulness into the working life. The first conference that I attended, actually I organized it myself, because back then no one were interested in mindfulness in the work life. So I had to organize it myself. It's some 6 years ago in Denmark. And we paired up with the biggest business newspaper in Denmark, and they advertised, and it was just all over the place. 70 people turned up. And here, Jochen just puts it in the newsletter and a little bit more, and then we have 250 people in the room. Now that's very encouraging for me, to see that the world is actually opening up to something that Jochen and Jay and Lauren will talk about, how it's actually having a big business but also personal benefits. So before I start, I also just like to share another little anecdote. I'm a man of anecdotes, hope you don't mind. Because I'm standing here as kind of an authority on mindfulness in the corporate space, because I developed or co-developed this organization, which is now in 20 countries and working with blue chip companies all around the world. But it didn't start like that. It started with me having my first job in an organization. I had to present mindfulness. And I've been studying and teaching mindfulness for already some 15 years back then. And I was really, really excited, because all this stuff that I had learned that had meant so much to me and changed my life, I was going to present this to a group of people who were busy. And I came into the room, and for the whole morning, I had them for a full day, for the whole morning I was just talking and sharing and putting them down on their bums to do their mindfulness training. And after lunch break, no one came back. Yeah, we're laughing now. Back then it was very painful, so we laughed too much. But the learning for me was very, very important, as painful as it was, because it taught me that the way that mindfulness is normally presented and the way I learned it, and the way I taught it back then, did not really, apply with the way people are working in very busy lives nowadays. So I had to spend quite some years putting together researchers, mindfulness masters, and business leaders from around the world to put together a program that kind of worked, that took mindfulness, which is often something we do at home in our private life, and then corporate, organizational, busy life, two different things, to put that together. And that has obviously taken some years, and here we are today, and having a big conference, and there are other people around the world doing this job. So that's why it's a big pleasure for me being here today. Thank you for showing up, and I'll be talking for something like 15 minutes. Please stay just for those 15 minutes. It will break my heart. Great. So what am I gonna talk about? I'm gonna say a few things. I'm first gonna introduce what is the rationale. Why does mindfulness even make sense in a busy work life? We already have enough to do. Then I'm just briefly gonna give a recipe on how can it be implemented. That was what I was going to talk about. How can it be trained in organizations? And I'm going to come with 3 points, 3 things that I think are from our experience working all over the world with mindfulness that is needed. And one of them is basically daily training, so I'm also going to put you through a little 5-minute mindfulness training. Before you leave this room, you will have done it, you know where it is. Okay? Then we can start the talk. No more anecdotes. So the big question is, why do companies like the ones you see up here, why do they use mindfulness? Why do they use mindfulness as a tool for their employees and their leaders? And I guess there are many answers to this. And one of them that I've come up with after talking to leaders of many of these companies is that no matter where we go, whether it's Europe, whether it's Asia, whether it's Australia or it's North America, people are experiencing something that we have named the paid world. Anud just referred to what is called the VUCA world, which is a term from the 70s or 80s. We have come up with a slightly different version of that, which we think quite precisely describes some of the things or characteristics of a modern work life. And I'm going to ask you to raise your hands if you can recognize these 4 components here. The first one is, people in daily work life nowadays feel like they're under some kind of pressure. How many feel like you're under pressure when you're at work? Not everyone, that's nice. Wait, I want to move to Singapore. Many people find that they are always on, with their iPhones or smartphones and laptops, iPads, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. How many feel like you're always on when you're at work? And sometimes at home as well. Third one, information overloaded. So much information that we have to deal with all the time. Some people already have their hands up. Great. And the last one, living in a distracted environment. Being at work and there are just tons of distractions around. Again, from all kinds of gadgets, electronic gadgets and people around us. How many feel like the world is distracted nowadays? So those of you who are not practicing mindfulness and who can relate to this, mindfulness may be a good tool for you. Because these organizations that we saw before, they are using mindfulness because they see their employees and leaders are actually living this, what we call paid reality, paid world. And it can be quite tough. It has some consequences to our well-being and to our performance. And we're going to look a little bit into that and thereby talk about why is it mindfulness works. So basically, to put it in a different way, work life has changed radically over the last decades. Just a few decades ago, work life looked a little bit like what you have over here on the left-hand side. Whether you had a typewriter, a dictaphone, or a meeting, whatever, it doesn't matter. The essence of it is there was one stream of information coming towards you at any given moment. And nowadays, it's more like over there, whether you have 6 screens, or it's all kinds of gadgets, mobile gadgets, and open office plans and so on. Lots of information coming to us all the time. And now I have to ask a question, are there anyone in here who feel like you still belong in that paradigm? I take the laughter for a no. Okay. So then the big and interesting question is, living in that paradigm over there, what is that doing to our brain? It's very simple from a neurological point of view. When the brain is confronted with more than one, so let's say 2 or 6 or 10 pieces of information at the same time, the brain reacts by trying to solve all of it at that same time. And that's a good word for this. Any good guesses? Multitasking, who said that? Thank you, multitasking, yes, that's the word. So we start to multitask. And that's the way the world works nowadays. We multitask, and we even encourage to multitask. However, there's been done a lot of research on multitasking. And some people are listening. We don't want to know where this is going. Before I go to the next slide, are there any good multitaskers in the room? Are there any proud multitaskers? That's a better question. There's one up there. Okay, great. So there's been done a lot of research on multitasking and its consequences for our well-being and our performance. And I'll just put it up here. It's not a good picture, that's why I made it red for you. Red means alarming, right? The biggest research study was done on Stanford, and they spent quite a few years with the intention of finding the benefits of multitasking. After a few years, there was a reporter who came to this research and he said, so what did you find? What are the benefits of multitasking? And you just saw Jochen. Researchers, they're quite conservative and they don't really just say their results like that. But this researcher, he said, we found nothing. Not one single benefit, but we did find a number of downsides. These are some of them. So we're less efficient, we have less overview, meaning we're less good at prioritization. It reduces our well-being, it decreases the quality of what we're doing, it hampers our creativity, drains our energy. And the most important one is that when we're doing this, it's basically rewiring our brain so it becomes our default way of working. Meaning we become really great multitaskers. Meaning that we become really great at being very little efficient, having little overview, being very little creative, and so on. That's just a very brief overview. There's some really good articles around this, and I'm happy to send out these articles to anyone who's interested in them. Right. So that was like multitasking. It's not the best thing in the world. There is a more fundamental downside of this paid world, which is we're basically losing our ability to pay attention to what we're doing right here, right now. And there was research that was published in Harvard Business Review a few years ago by Edward Hallowell. He had gone into organizations and he had been looking at people's ability to pay attention. And what he could see is that over the last 20 years, the ability to pay attention has dropped radically. He calls it attention deficit trait. The inability to pay attention for a longer period of time, whether it's to an email, or it's a conversation, or a meeting, or any kind of task. Our mind goes all over the place, losing the ability to pay attention. There's been done other research looking at, so how much is our attention actually impaired? How often is our mind wandering away from the present moment? So like when we're writing an email or in a meeting, imagine yourself in a meeting in your company, how often is your mind present and how often is it wandering away? And the result is a little bit shocking. It comes here published in Science a few years ago again. 46.9% of our waking hours, our mind is not present in what we're doing, but basically just involuntarily wandering off in past or in future, in east and in west, everywhere else than where we are right now. And that's a result of the paid world, which leads us to multitask, basically losing the ability to pay attention. Who were the proud multitaskers? Okay. So it's a little bit like this. This is what the modern mind looks like. We're sitting at work Monday morning trying to do this very important email, thinking about golf. Someone who can recognize this? And now all the thanks, Sophie. Now all the women are laughing because this is men, but I think it's the same for women. Anyway, finally John, he's getting to play golf and he's thinking of his wife or whoever it is, we don't really know. And finally getting to have this dinner with the wife and thinking back at work. So that's really just a great analogy for what the mind is like nowadays. Okay. This was the burning platform. This is why we maybe need some kind of tools that can help us to harness the attention, to stay present with emails, with meetings, with tasks, and with our children when we come home, and our spouses for that matter. But the good news is, and here's a video, and now I want to hypnotize you all. This is so beautiful, isn't it? This is basically what the brain looks like from the inside. And now we're turning to the good news. Because the good news is coming from neuroscience. Neuroscience is telling us that we can actually change. This is the brain from the inside. It has about 100 billion neurons, which are these balls, and it's connected by 5,000 synapses, which is put on again. And it's a huge network up there. And basically everything we're doing and saying and thinking and experiencing leaves tracks in our brain in form in the shape of neural networks, connections on there. So every time we're doing something with our brain, we're actually creating physiological connections in the brain. Which basically means we're free to change. We're not bound to lose our ability to pay attention. We can retrain that ability to be focused with whatever we're doing right here, right now. That's the good news. Does that sound okay? Right. So that leads us to mindfulness training. What is mindfulness training? And mindfulness training is going back 2,500 years, as you probably know, and it's been researched thousands of times. So I'll just give you a very brief definition here. Basically, mindfulness training is learning to manage our attention so that our attention is not wandering off into rumination or negative thoughts or things that we don't need right now, but really staying present in the moment, because that's all we have, is this present moment. So if we're not present in the moment, we're wasting out of our life. So that's basically what mindfulness is, very short definition. Learning to manage the mind. And to put it in a more simple way, it's basically the same as going to the gym for our muscles. We go there because we want a stronger body, so that we can walk the stairs and be healthy in life. mindfulness training, a little bit similar. It's just inside the brain, in the mind. It's the mind we're training. Right. And now I'm told there's 5 minutes left, which is a great thing, because we're almost done. So this was like the first answer, or the answer to the first question, which is, why mindfulness in work life? There's so much to do already. And the answer is very simple. We're living in a stressful world, lots of information, the paid reality. And that is impairing our attention. So we cannot do our jobs well. We get stressed, we get burned out. We cannot pay attention when we come home. That's why we need mindfulness, because that's the training of learning to regain that ability, to really be present, despite all the chaos and busyness. So that's the first question. The second one is, okay, how do we implement this? How do we introduce it in organizations? And we've been doing this for a number of years, and as I mentioned, almost all over the world, not so much in Africa and Alaska, but many other places. We will go to Alaska, I'm sure. They're catching a lot of, fish out there. We want them to do it mindfully so the fish are not suffering unnecessarily. Anyway, we've been doing it all over the place, and we've gained some experience in what works and definitely what doesn't work, as you heard from my first anecdote. So 3 things that we have found is very important. Actually 4 things. The first one is not up here, but that is, this is no quick fix, it takes time. So time, dedication, resources is needed if you really want to see a difference. I'll not talk more about that. But specifically, how do you do, what do you need? You need 3 things. You need some kind of daily training. That people who you're introducing this to, whether it's at leadership level or employee level, that people are actually doing this training. It's not a theory, it's a training. It's a, sit down, do that training. We experienced 10 minutes has really good results. I think you're going to present some of the results on our program as well. Yeah. So what he's going to show is based on 10 minutes a day. It's not a lot. And I'm going to guide through this training in a few minutes. The other thing that is needed is some mindful strategies. Basically, mind strategies for coping with a world that is, under pressure, always on, and so on. And I'm going to say just a few words about that, but not that much. And then work-life applications. And I'll say a bit more about those as well. And I'll start with those. Work-life applications. It's very, very important to take mindfulness and apply it to what we are doing. If it's just 10 minutes a day, sitting on a chair or a cushion somewhere, it has a limited effect. It's very important to take it into work life and the challenges. And specifically, how do we apply this when we're faced with our inbox that is just, piling up more and more emails, and our way of returning on those emails. Also, how do we use it in meetings? So really, from a mindfulness perspective, best practice tips on applying mindfulness in work-life situations. That is very important. And we do it in all kinds of ways, like even from goal setting, prioritization, planning, and so on. There are many, many applications of this. But that is key, to put it into work life. The second one, again, as we spoke about, the mindful strategies. Here are some of the 8 basic fundamental strategies that underpins this whole tradition of mindfulness. You're very welcome to make a lot of photos. You're also welcome to give me your email address, and I'll be happy to forward you these slides afterwards. So you can see them out there. Basically, these are all strategies for dealing with a world that is busy, that is crazy, in a way that we feel better about it, and we do it in a more efficient way so we're not wasting our time. That's a very short description of it. And the opposite of all of these 8 is basically coming from the reptilian brain, which is a weird part of the brain that is doing all kinds of funny things to us, makes us do all kinds of funny things in work life. These are the opposites, the antidotes. Right. And then the last thing that is needed, as I mentioned, is the daily training. And I'm going to end on this one and guide you through just a few minutes of this mindfulness training so you'll experience it. Does that sound okay? So I'm just going to take a few minutes of guiding you into it, and there'll be a few minutes of silence. And then I will not ring a bell, because I don't have a bell, but I will just say that you can do a question and open up to do. Thanks so much, I feel quite refreshed now.
after this little exercise training, and my mind's trained. One question I have is that sometimes we say that may all be nice, but that's not from me. In your experience, having worked with a lot of people, trained a lot of people, are there people for whom that is not working? Are there people for whom it is particularly working? What are kind of the differences?
It's a very good and simple question, and I would say the training, the rewiring works for everyone, but then of course some people are interested in it, others are not. And in my experience, it's a matter of finding the right words, the right terminology, the right way of introducing it. Because we all want more peace, we all want to be better human beings, we also want to be more effective in what we're doing, whether it's becoming a great parent or doing our emails. So we find that when we introduce this in a company, and it's always on a voluntary basis, then it's 90-95% of the people who actually wants to join the program and who continue the training afterwards. And then some get a lot out of it, and life-changing, they say. And others just tag along and enjoy it.
Okay, are there any questions from the audience? We have some microphones in the aisle, and I think we have also do we have a microphone to go around? Pass it to the guys. You. Yes.
Okay. My name is Dorothea. I never tried before today this technique in this way. And I found very interesting, at some point I stopped counting. And I was wondering, but I was still focusing very much on the breathing out and noticing nuances of it. And then I thought, oh, I'm supposed to count. So how important is that counting?
Very clear, very simple question. The counting is not important. The counting is a little bit like, I don't know what they're called, you know, when a child gets his first bike, there are these extra wheels on it. What are they called? Training wheels. So the counting is like training wheels. In the beginning, and for many of us, it's good for a lifetime. But for some people, 10-15%, you'll be one of those. Counting becomes kind of a distraction, not necessary. So counting you can leave out. Yeah. Thank you.
Just behind you.
Hi, I'm Wendy. Have you tried telling teenagers about the attention deficit trait? You know, because I have 3 teenagers, right? They will text, Twitter, Facebook, play computer games, and do their homework at the same time. And amazingly, they still get good results. So it's a bit hard for parents to say, well, you can't do that, you know, or it's not mindful. So, and given this is a university where a lot of students would be used to that kind of way of working, what would you say to educators and parents?
You've got a great challenge. I would say a bit more. I've got 2 teenagers at home myself as well. So I know exactly what you're talking about. And I have been working in schools, high schools, universities, teaching this as well. I think it's impossible to put this on top of people and say, you should do this, you should not multitask, you should not. I think what I have experienced works the best is to get them into the experience of what does it feel like to be settled, to be like centered, and at the same time have them try to observe, be aware of what does it actually feel like to be dispersed. And I haven't met many people who say, you know, it's really a great experience to be all over the place. When they've experienced those 2, also teenagers, they can see, wow, it's actually nicer to kind of focus on things and not have all those things going at the same time. My own 2 teenagers at home, they've stopped all that Facebook and Twitter for the same reason. I haven't told them to, but they just stopped because they could experience it wasn't useful for them.
Maybe can I add something to that, since I'm also in the classroom quite a bit. And I feel sometimes, it's become a normal way, right, for the students to work. I sometimes feel they overestimate how good they are at it. Because I do know, and I tell my students, look, attendance points are not just given for being physically present, but you actually have to be mentally present. And those are 2 quite different things, especially nowadays. So students can be physically present, but just not be there really. And it's, if I see what they're getting out of it, it's just as bad as if they were not physically present.
Does that extend to the faculty?
My comment. Okay, next question.
My name is Albert. I noticed you used the term right here, right now. Was that an intentional term, and is it a term that relates to mindfulness? Because I'm starting to hear this particular phrase more often. So did you use that with intention as a particular tool, or again, a terminology that relates to mindfulness?
It's a good question. I don't have a good answer. I think it's not a term I normally use. I don't know how that slipped out. But I do agree it's something that is often used in this mindfulness world, right here, right now, be here now, those kind of things. Yeah, and that is fundamentally what it's about. But I didn't have any agenda for using them specifically.
Okay, maybe one final question. We have time for one more question.
Hello, I'm Glenn. Sometimes as a manager, multitasking doesn't seem to be a choice when, let's say, you're working with a team and they come to you, because they all have their own disciplines and delegations, and they come to you and they're asking you to think on many, many different levels at the same time. So 5 minutes on this problem, and then somebody else comes in at the same time, 5 minutes on this problem, this problem, this problem, and you find yourself inundated with things, and it's not like you can't multitask and say, I'm only going to focus on your problem now, and then no more. If you're dealing with a whole lot of things at once. So how does that apply?
Just tell them all to buckle off. No, I've been working in corporate world a number of years myself as a manager, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think it's not just for managers. I see it for everyone. It's the same challenge. My answer would be, it's not multitask or don't multitask. It's finding what works for you and what doesn't work for you. How can you use your mind more effectively or more efficiently without falling into the trap of multitasking as a default mode. And what we're training in this mindfulness training is the ability to shift our attention rapidly, really faster, and really letting go of things right away. Because the problem is that we hang on to many things at the same time. That's one thing. The other thing that we're learning here is to have this open awareness that knows what's going on around us, but without being engaged in it. So we have more the ability to know what to do in the moment, a clearer mind that sees clearly, now I need to attend to this, and I know that in 2 minutes it will be that one, but I'm not attending to it yet, because I have the mental stability and clarity to really do this, and know that that comes afterwards.
Okay, sorry, I'm afraid we have to go on, but rest assured, there will be more question and answer sessions after the upcoming presentations. So for those who still have questions, maybe we come back to all of them. We will also come back to some topics. Thank you again, Rasmus.